I am back from Warhammer World once more, and boy howdy do I have some things to talk about. War Games on Toast. You what? Welcome to War Games on Toast, all of you lovely people. It's me. It's Toast. How are you this wonderful Wednesday? The Sunday just gone was the latest event at Warhammer World for Warcry, and man, what a great event it was. Around 35 players turned up, the lists were all varied and wonderful, and we even got to play the new Ferocious Gnarlwood mission pack. Naturally, I am going to go through all of that in this video today, so buckle up. But before I get into all of that, please consider leaving a like, a comment and subscribing, as that helps me fight against that dastardly YouTube algorithmic demon. And if you want to help in a more tangible way, please consider signing up to my YouTube members or my Patreon, like all of these wonderful people on screen now. Badoosh. With all of that out of the way, let's get on with the show.
And now for something completely different.
So I guess I should go over what I brought and why before I go into all the nitty gritty of the missions and top performing lists and all of that jazz. I took Cruel Boys for the first time in about 12 months. I haven't played them at all in that time frame, and the list I brought I cobbled together in about 5 minutes before I left for Nottingham. To say I went unprepared is an understatement, but I am a sucker for going into these things blind for whatever reason. Thankfully, the list I brought is a list I have ran before. Mostly. I had to make a few changes here and there since it had become illegal with the recent FAQ and points changes. So I brought a Bolt Boy boss, 2 Gut Rippers with pointy sticks, a Potgrot, Torka Tough Skull, Shank, a Clawback with +1 strength, and a Brute boss. It's important to note that we were told it was fixed blessings minutes before the event started, so I thought getting that claw back to strength 6 was the safest bet with my 20 remaining points. This list has a little bit of everything, and that plays really well into the new mission pack. Each mission tends to have an objective / kill primary supported by the opposite as its secondary. My thoughts were that this list can do both pretty darn well. This is because the Brute Boss and Clawback are really good in combat. It can swing into almost anything at strength 6, throw in my reaction for control and bonus damage, and my list has serious kill potential. The Bolt Boy boss also helps a lot here as he can pop off and projects threat really well. In objective focused missions, I have 8 guys, most of which have fantastic durability. I mean, Gut Rippers are T4 15 wounds, Torka and the Bolt Boy boss are T4 20 wounds, Clawbacks are rocking 35 wounds, and the Brute is T5 with 30. These guys just aren't being shifted all that easily, and the spot slot for a Potgrot helps keep them alive even longer, and also your messing exists. The list also isn't slow, with movement 4 on nearly everyone, movement 3 and charge on one, and movement 5 and charge on another. I could really just get around, and I had access to War if I really needed it. So that's the list. I have some amendments if I was to run it again, but I was really happy with what I brought with what I had on hand. So let's get into those missions. So it was a 4-game event, and we played Razed to the Ground, a Tithe for Blades, Mystic Glade, and Brutal Encounter. This is a pretty balanced pack, all things considered, with 2 dedicated kill missions and 2 dedicated objective missions. There are no treasure missions, which is a big boon for the event as a whole, because every treasure mission ever made is fucking dreadful.
I am shocked and appalled.
So going over those missions, Razed to the Ground is round 1. This is actually my favourite mission of the whole pack. How it works is you have 3 objectives and you score by holding 1 objective, 2 objectives, and more objectives than your opponent for 1 point a pop. As a secondary, you gain 2 victory points if you are the first player to land a kill next to an objective. The twist is that the losing player each round has the option of removing an objective from the game permanently. It's a super simple mission that plays a lot like Hidden Vault, only a lot less bullshit. Round 2 was a Tithe for Blades, our first kill mission, and one that is pretty darn interesting. You get 1 point for killing 1 or more lads, another point for killing more lads than your opponent, 1 point for killing a hero, and 1 point for killing things that have the ally rune mark. As an added benefit, heroes and allies score 1 point every turn after their death, so the earlier you kill them, the more they are worth in points over the course of the game. The secondary adds a single temporary objective to the board that's placed by the player who's activating second that round, so not necessarily tied to initiative. This will score you 2 points if you manage to hold it. Finally, the twist. The losing player can pick a friendly and an enemy model. Your model is no longer counted for the primary of that turn, and your opponents can't control objectives. This mission has the chance to spiral out of control, and it did for a lot of players. That being said, what ended up happening in my game was we just spent a lot of time smashing heads because I was against Stormcast, and at no point did anyone score on the secondary, but I'll get into that more in a bit. Round 3 was Mystic Glade, and Mystic Glade can get a little bit wild. It's your standard objective game primary, only this time you have 4 objectives instead of 3. The secondary is about killing. Basically, if you kill someone whilst you are both next to an objective, and then you score the objective with your guy within 1 inch of it, you score 2 points. If that sounds really awkward to score, then let me tell you, it is. It really, really is. The twist is where the spice is though. The losing player gets bonus wild dice equal to the amount of victory points they are losing by. That can lead to some pretty incredible turns where you can basically make whatever combination of dice you want and possibly still take the initiative. As a comeback mechanic, it's a lot of fun. I'm not entirely sure it's balanced though. And finally, we have round 4 with Brutal Encounter, and I'm just going to come right out and say it. I don't like this mission at all, not one bit. It's got the kill mission primary, so 1 more hero ally for kill points, and the secondary awards 2 victory points if you control more table quotas than your opponent. The twist lets the losing player pick a single model, and that model loses 1 activation this turn. I don't like this mission because it kind of spirals and it's a little bit too easy to cheese. If you are winning the game, you have either hidden all game with superior numbers and just camped quarters and won entirely on the secondary, or you are winning in primary and automatically start winning the secondary as your opponent lacks the resources to stop you taking territory, putting your opponent into a death spiral. The twist is a fine comeback mechanic, I guess, but it doesn't really stop that spiral from happening. This mission only really feels good when both warbands are balanced against each other quite well. Otherwise, it often ends up being a very one-sided matchup. So those are the missions, and I like most of them. The only one I don't is Brutal Encounter because it feels a little bit off as an inclusion. Although when I get to how I played the event, Brutal Encounter was actually a godsend, even though I do hate it quite a bit. But before I get into how I did and my round reports, let's look at what was taking to the event with a warband composition kind of thing. And badoosh, there's a pretty funky selection of lads here, although there is nothing that really stands out as a wild pick. Traditionally at Warhammer World events, you get all kinds of wacky things turn up. For example, we've had multiple events where Corvus Cabal and Unmade have been in the event and done well. This time, however, it's a little bit more vanilla at a glance. That being said, the actual makeup of each list was drastically different. As you can see, Stormcast Eternals were by far the most popular pick here with 6 players. We had all kinds of things though. We had Sacrosanct Chamber, we had Vanguard Chamber, we had Black Talons, we had Kaltia lists, the works. Really cool stuff, even if they made up almost 20% of the player base. Sylvaneth were the next most popular, and again, these lads packed some variety. My favourite was an 8-man list that packed 4 Kurnoth Hunters, which just looked awesome. After that, we have a nice chunk of 2 elves. The standouts are Vulcan Flameseekers maintaining a degree of popularity in Warhammer World, Nurgle still being played despite huge points hits and general negativity from the community regarding their viability, Slanesh make an appearance, Vexmore of course says hi, and Royal Beast Flayers. These lads are one of the hardest warbands to play, but that has not discouraged people from playing them anyway. Oh, and of course Iron Golems, who are really propping up Gen 1 Warcry this time around. After that, the one-offs are pretty damn cool too. Seraphon coming in only once after such a fun update with Croxagore is very surprising. What's even more surprising is the list, which was 3 Slan Star Masters, which is just insane. It was a 4-man list packing 3 Star Masters. It was an absolute hoot to see, and it did pretty darn well. And like nearly every event, my buddy Maps comes in with his Dark Horse, and they are back at it again, and you just love to see it. Dude is a master of generating copious amounts of wild dice. And with Mystic Glade being in the pack, well, it makes that even easier. All of that being said though, there is a distinct lack of previously popular factions here, as in we have 0 Soulblight, we have 0 Caradon, 0 Ogres outside of Morpack, 0 Cities of Sigmar. What is really disappointing though is the complete lack of Riverblades and Pyregeists. These are the newest kids on the block, and they have been mostly ignored for 2 events in a row. And that's a really bad look, especially when you have such great representation from slightly older releases. I mean, we have 2 Black Talons, 2 Vulcan Flameseekers, and we have Morpack in there. You know, it kind of feels bad that the latest release is so competitively lacking in representation. But enough fannying about. How did I do? Well, I landed 2nd place. That's right, your boy Toast landed podium with a 4-0 win-loss ratio. Absolutely going in there and smashing the living shit out of everything, but I did get pipped at the post by my buddy Andy in the first tiebreaker. I am super happy with my placement. I couldn't have asked for more. I mean, getting a perfect win record is a first for me at a live event. I just went there, got the 4-piece. I am over the moon with that. To quickly touch on my games, game 1 was against Iron Jaws. He had a lot of brutes and a mega boss. My opponent was fantastic and the game was a joy, and I had to use my cunning to outmaneuver his slow moving lads. Basically, I won this game because I purposely chose not to capture one of the objectives on turn 1, which gave my opponent the lead going into turn 2. This then let me remove an objective of my choice from the board, which took 3 of his guys out of the game because they were too slow to get back into any position remotely relevant, even with a mega boss using Great War or War, because he was on the other end of the board already. Throwing the fact I managed to get a few key kills on objectives, I took the win fairly comfortably. Game 2 was Tith, and it was against Stormcast Sacrosanct. He had a very small warband, I think it was 4 or 5 models at most, and it really was just a case of us butting heads until someone died. Turns out a clawback with strength 6 is really good at eating through Stormcast. Funnily enough, we actually never managed to score the secondary, leading to a very, very low scoring game of 5-3 in my favour. It was really close. It was literally down to the wire on the last turn of the game. Game 3 was Mystic Glade against a fellow Cruel Boys player, which means we were at each other's throats from turn 1. This was our one chance to assert dominance and prove who was the cruelest of boys. His list was really cool because he was packing a Toka Tough Skull and an Ale Guzzler Gargant, which is a pretty darn serious threat. That being said, I managed to capitalise on an early mistake, followed by a missed Talker Net to almost take the table. His Gargant survived, but it was one heck of a scrap. Drag and Maul was a nightmare to deal with though, and that stopped me scoring my secondary every single turn. It was infuriating. Finally, game 4 was against Black Talons, and I am not going to lie, I cheesed the ever-living shit out of this game because I was just not willing to get murdered by being overly aggressive. I was pretty darn aggressive most of this tournament, and I knew if I went in too hard here, I was going to lose really badly because I had 3 heroes, and every one of those would escalate the score in his favour dramatically, so I had to be very cagey. He had a 5-man warband with only 1 hero. So if I lost more than 1 hero, he was basically going to win, and my heroes can be a bit squishy. I mean, the Bolt Boy boss for one, Clawback is the other because he's got very low toughness. Luck was on my side though, because on turn 1, he had a 3-man drop to my 6-man drop. I took advantage of this massive model discrepancy early, and I took control of 3 of the 4 quarters and then held them all game. I barely engaged in combat, and that's because this battle was basically just one giant trap for my opponent. He had 2 options: play cagey to avoid being murdered by the clawback and the brute boss and then lose on secondary, or play aggressively and then get slammed by cunning trap, clawback, bosses, and lose on both. He recognised this conundrum early on and tried to use his superior range to poke my guys, but it wasn't enough. He was playing a little bit too cagely for a little bit too long. The only guy who really got into combat was Rostus Oxenhammer, who whiffed his attack, got hit by a cunning trap, and then got ground into the dirt with the one shot by the brute boss, which was just unfortunate on so many levels. For me though, Torka Toughskull was the player of this game because I ran him into Lerai on turn 2, netted a Hendrik who was nearby but stayed out of his attack range, and then goaded Neve into combat, which locked all 3 models down for about 2 turns. That's like 600 points of his list locked down by a 125 point throwaway net guy, right? It was a worthy sacrifice, and whilst he did die, the board control that let me maintain, especially once Rostus died, yeah, it was well worth the sacrifice. Overall, it was a very, very slow game, very uneventful, but it had to be done for the 4-piece. Like, if I'd went any more aggressively, it would have been a loss, and it was really down to my opponent to force me to do something, and he played a bit too cagely, but I honestly don't think he had a better option. I was hiding all my grots behind terrain whilst being in cunning trap range. It was difficult. He was basically firing away at the clawback, and I had a pot grot who healed him up, so it just didn't do anything. So overall, I had a great event. What I haven't told you, however, is how legendary my aforementioned pot grot really was. Oh my god, this guy was insane. I mean, he landed like 7 or 8 damage on a mega boss and killed it on an objective and scored me 2 points. He did like 12 damage to a killer boss that directly led to its death, which also scored me 2 points. He scrapped the Celestial Dracoline and lived and clobbered it to near death with a spoon. The guy did 6 damage to Hendrik, dodged all of his attacks, and then healed my clawback all in a single breath. This guy deserves a blessing. He is a total legend, the king of all grots. I will never doubt pot grot again. I normally take a stab grot, but man, that ladle, that little cauldron, that does work. I wholeheartedly recommend ladling the biggest things in the game to death. But that's enough about me. Let's look at the top 10 lists. From the top, we have Andy and his Royal Beast Flayers. I love Andy. He has been putting in months of work to get Royal Beast Flayers ingrained into his soul. This is not an easy warband to play, and he smashed it with a 4-0 and landed first place. His list was the Royal Flaymaster, the Wielder of the Blade, 2 Barons, and 7 Ghoul Trackers. When I was dabbling in RBF, this is the kind of list makeup I was looking at. It is super strong, but requires a lot of thinking to really get working. Having 11 lads against some pretty small warbands means Andy would have had to do a lot of waiting to take full advantage of his warband's incredible mobility, and I love it. Naturally, I came second, so moving on to third, we have Leon and his Demons of Slaanesh. This list is super simple and incredibly powerful. 4 Demonettes, Vexmore, Chimera, that's it. This list, from what I gathered, was a nightmare because it was very fast for objective play. Demonettes are good at killing other chaff, and the combination of Vexmore and Chimera brings a bucket load of damage and durability for kill missions. As a side note, I got to chat with Leon, and he is an absolutely fantastic bloke. Fourth is Paul's Iron Golems, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think this lad brought 1 box Iron Golems, which is awesome if he landed 4th with that. Dominar, Signifier, Drillmaster, Armator, Breacher, and some Legionaries, and that's it. The list has damage and durability in droves. Iron Golems are a super solid warband, and me and Eitan ranked them pretty darn high on our tier list a few months back. Anthony rocks up in 5th with his spite-filled Demons of Nurgle. I chatted with Anthony over lunch, and he came in looking to prove Nurgle still had the chops to place highly, and landing 5th certainly proved that. He brought a Poxbringer, Mindstealer, Vexmore, Nurglings, and 4 Plague Bearers. This list is durable, but also has a lot of damage. He blessed with Brutality on his Bringer and Mindstealer, which gives him a lot of damage just out of the pocket, and of course Vexmaw. And then you have all the utility from the Mindstealer, easily one of the most underrated allies Chaos has access to, cheap, powerful, and a veritable toolbox. Onto my love, my moon, and my stars. It is Demetrius, otherwise known as Phylax, rocking up with his Ephelim's Pandemonium. We have an aspiring champion, 2 Chaos Warriors, one of the swanky new chosen, Ephelim, Flamespooler, Spawnmaw, and Apotrax. He buffed movement on his chosen, attacks on his champion, and strength on Ephelim's ranged profile. This list is excellent. It has so many ways to mess with your opponent, and because of Spawnmaw, champion, and Ephelim, and the chosen, it does a lot of damage when it needs to. Throw in the bulk of the Slaves to Darkness and you are sticking around whilst also dancing everywhere. I have scrapped with Demetrius many times with different variations on this list, and he came in with a new variant and smashed it at this event. 7th is Stuart with Monster Killers, and he took 1 box. He blessed his Howlers with crit and his Harpoon with strength, and that's it. Monster Killers are great. They are incredibly bursty with their abilities being brutal, having all that damage potential in the pocket with a 15 wound base as your platform, and rocking an 8-man with the speed on those Howlers. It's one of the best 1 boxes you can pick up by far. They are not true cruel boys, but green is green and I will not hold it against them. Simon hits 8th with his Slaves to Darkness. He brings some sauce with this list. We are talking about a Chaos Knight, a Lord on Karkadrak, 2 Shield Warriors, and 3 Marauders with Axe and Shield, not flails. This list is burly, it's fast, and it can hit like a brick. I didn't get to natter with Simon at the event, but I did talk to his round for opponents, and yeah, that Karkadrak was a menace in their game. I like this list a lot, and I especially like it because he avoided nearly every single usual suspect Slaves to Darkness normally take. Super cool. Coming in with 9th is my buddy Mark with his Questor Soulsworn. Mark rocked up with these guys after watching my video, and he pulled through with his only loss being to Demetrius, the only list capable of packing more tricks than Questor. He brought 3 hammers, 1 spear, a relictor, and a duelist. This is exactly the kind of list I like to see. It has all the sauce Questor can bring, and that added duelist is just wonderful. Easily one of the least played models in the faction, and it is a disgrace that no one takes it apart from me and Mark. Face Me Cowards was a big deal in objective games and let him actually compete despite having a smaller warband. Questor are often shat on, and seeing them perform well enough to land in the top 10 with a capable pilot, I just love to see it. And finally in 10th we have Nick. Nick was running pure Black Talons, which is insane. I love the Black Talons, but they are hard to get working, and landing 10th is one heck of an achievement. I scrapped with him in my game 4, and he was really a great guy. His warband was also gorgeous. He won Best Painted and Judge's Choice if my memory serves correctly. He took pure Black Talons and gave Lerai a movement blessing. Funnily enough, he also clashed with the other Black Talons player in this event who took allies, and from what I gather, he managed to overpower them with raw dogged 1-boxing. Frickin' love that. And that's it. Those were the top 10. What a great variety of lists and compositions. One of the biggest strengths of the UK meta, or the Warhammer World meta, is that people bring the weirdest shit and just pull things out of the bag. And with several 1-boxes in the top 10, it's a great place for Warcry to be. But I didn't want to ignore all the other really funky lists that didn't quite hit the top 10, so I'm going to touch on my favourite 3. Alex came in and brought the Vanguard Chamber, and I love this list. He went 2-2 and landed 14th, which is awesome for a list that is absolutely considered off meta. He brought a Grand Hammer Questor, a Hunter Prime, Calthea, and 3 Vanguard Hunters. This list is fast, it has loads of range shenanigans, and Calthea plus Questo are pushing these guys when it comes to action economy. Alex is a great guy, and he showed me an earlier iteration of this list a few months back. Seeing him refine it and land in the top half of the placements is awesome. From what he told me, the list was a blast to play to boot, and that's not even mentioning the fact that he put this list through its paces at this event. 3 out of the 4 opponents he faced were in the top 10. One of them won the bloody event. So a great showing with one of the coolest darn lists I have ever seen. Jessica brought a Nurgle list that is it's just so cool. She landed 17th, which is respectable, and brought 2 Beasts of Nurgle, a Spawn, a Scrivener, a Poxbringer, and a handful of Bearers. This list is just really Nurgly, and it did well. I mean, she went toe to toe with the legend that is off Meta Musings and whooped his ass thoroughly, because it turns out having 100 wounds worth of Spawn and Beasts is really hard to cut through. The final list I'm going to touch on has to be off Meta Musings though. How could I ever leave him off this? Rocking up with a 2-2 with Skaven, he brought a Warp Fire Stormfiend, 3 Storm Vermin, Vexmore, Skabic and Lascavia. This is a really solid list that has a lot of play with bodyguard shenanigans, can cut through most things with that Fiend and Vexmore, and has some interesting play with Lascavia and Skabic. It is super dice hungry though, but I like it a lot, and also the conversions on these models are beautiful. As I mentioned before, one of the roadblocks Aitan bumped into was Jessica's bulky as all hell Nurgle list, but that isn't all. He also clashed with a Chimera and also the Ale Guzzler Gargant I fought as well. He had a real tough time dealing with those monsters in particular, which we can chalk up to a little bit of bad luck. So that was the event, and as always, it was fantastic. Warhammer World throws great events, and it's always a blast meeting new and old friends. One of the benefits of being a content creator is I get to talk to so many people and check on all their games, catch up, and just have a good time. I accidentally bumped into a lad called Andrew at the bar, and we got nattering about Flameseekers. He took a really fun list that was packed with movement blessings, which is insane. And it did well, it went 2-2, right? It was such a cool idea to bring almost every single model with +1 movement, because that really plays into the Flameseeker's inherent movement buffs. Like I said, he hit the top half of the placements in his first ever event. He's had less than 10 games in total, and that was awesome to see. And it turns out he watches my stuff, and I had no idea until after our chat. This kind of stuff reinvigorates my love of the hobby and of content creation, because I would never have met any of these amazing people without it. I should be back for another event in September, and if you are heading to it, pop by and drop me a good old hearty boy howdy. If you liked this video, please consider leaving a like, commenting and subscribing. Until next time, lads, ladies and everyone in between and beyond, ta-ra. Oh, you think I forgot about the photo reel? Enjoy some awesome photos. Badoosh! Howdy, how you doing? It's Toast coming at you with the post-toast credits. A huge thank you to my algorithmic demon slayers, Armour Enthusiast 7, Brioche, CT6497, Girth Demon, Head Knight of Paint, Heinz D, Long Run Hobbies, Lord Phylax, Sable Saber, Sam, Steve Bean, Tough Tootin' Baby, and Velas. Thanks again for all of your support, and I will catch you next time. Ta-ra.